The grand throne room of the Zephyrian Empire stretched across 3 football fields, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that cast dancing shadows across the assembled court. Princess Lyralii stood at the center of it all, her 4 arms crossed in obvious displeasure, while her silvery scales shimmered with the telltale crimson flush of annoyance. The human before her looked so utterly ordinary that she couldn't help but wonder if this was some elaborate joke. This, she gestured with 2 of her hands toward the figure standing calmly before the throne. This is what the High Council sends as Earth's representative? Mother, surely there's been some mistake. The human in question was unremarkable by any galactic standard. Average height, brown hair that seemed perpetually disheveled, wearing what appeared to be simple traveling clothes that had seen better days. He carried no visible weapons, bore no marks of rank or station, and his face held an expression of mild curiosity rather than the fear or awe that most beings displayed when brought before the Zephyrian court. Marcus Chun had been expecting this reaction. After 3 months of traveling through hyperspace aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Dream, he'd had plenty of time to read the cultural briefings. The Zephyrians were a proud warrior race, their society built around concepts of honor, strength, and the demonstration of power. To them, physical prowess and the ability to dominate others were the highest virtues. Humans, by comparison, were seen as soft, weak creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel through blind luck rather than any inherent capability. Princess Lyralii, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber despite not being raised. I understand your disappointment. By your standards, I'm sure I appear quite unremarkable. The princess laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with the hiss of an angry serpent. Unremarkable? You're barely worth noticing at all. Look at you. No natural armor, no claws, no fangs. Your species can't even survive in most planetary environments without artificial assistance. And yet the humans claim they deserve a seat on the Galactic Council. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled courtiers. The Zephyrian nobility were an impressive sight, each standing at least 8 feet tall, their scaled hides ranging from deep emerald to brilliant azure, their 4 powerful arms capable of crushing stone, their eyes glowing with inner fire. They had conquered 17 star systems through pure military might, and their empire was still expanding. The idea that these fragile humans could be their equals was clearly laughable to most of them. Empress Viridian, however, remained silent on her massive throne. The ruler of the Zephyrian Empire was ancient by any standard, over 4 centuries old, and her scales had taken on the deep purple hue that marked elder royalty. Her 8 eyes studied the human with an intensity that made several courtiers shift uncomfortably. Unlike her daughter, the Empress did not seem amused by Marcus's apparent weakness. Tell me, human, Princess Lyralii continued, beginning to pace around Marcus in a predatory circle. What exactly do you think you can offer an alliance with the Zephyrian Empire? Your ships are smaller than our fighters. Your weapons are primitive. Your soldiers are weak. Your planets are mostly backwater colonies barely worth the fuel it would take to conquer them. What possible reason could we have for treating with Earth as equals? Marcus turned slightly to keep the princess in his line of sight as she circled him, but his posture remained relaxed, almost casual. Those are all fair points, Your Highness. Our technology is indeed less advanced than yours in many ways. Our ships are smaller, our weapons less powerful by raw metrics. We're physically weaker than most galactic species. Finally, some honesty, Lyralii said with satisfaction. So you admit that humanity brings nothing to the table? Not nothing, Marcus replied mildly. Just different things. For instance, we're very good at solving problems that seem impossible. This drew another laugh from the princess, echoed by many of the courtiers. Impossible problems? Such as the Kethral Plague. The laughter died instantly. The Kethral Plague had swept through the Outer Rim systems 15 years ago, killing billions of beings across dozens of species. The Zephyrians had lost 3 entire colony worlds before the plague burned itself out, leaving behind dead systems that were still quarantined to this day. The plague was a natural disaster, Princess Lyrelii said, though her voice had lost some of its mocking tone. No one could have prevented it. You're right that no one prevented it, Marcus agreed. But someone did cure it. The vaccine that eventually stopped the plague spread, that was developed by a team of human doctors on Earth. We've never claimed credit because it seemed more important to get the cure distributed than to argue about recognition. Empress Viridian leaned forward slightly on her throne. Prove this claim. Marcus reached into his travel pack, a movement that caused several guards to tense, and withdrew a data crystal. Medical records from the Earth Pathogen Research Institute, signed testimony from the researchers involved, and genetic analysis of the vaccine strain, all independently verifiable through galactic medical databases. He tossed the crystal gently to the nearest courtier, who fumbled to catch it with all 4 hands before passing it up the chain to the throne. Princess Lyrelii watched this exchange with growing confusion. Even if this is true, she said, creating vaccines is hardly the stuff of warriors. It's the work of scholars, researchers, not exactly the foundation for military alliance. No, Marcus agreed, but it is the foundation for something else. You see, Your Highness, humans have a particular talent for finding solutions when the situation seems hopeless. It's not really about strength or advanced technology. It's about perspective. Perspective. The princess's scales were beginning to shift toward a more orange hue. Curiosity mixed with continued skepticism. Let me give you an example. 300 years ago, one of our colonies was attacked by raiders from the Drakthal Confederation. Are you familiar with them? Several courtiers hissed at the mention of the name. The Drakthal were notorious pirates who had terrorized the Outer Rim for centuries, their ships fast and deadly, their tactics utterly without honor or mercy. The Drakthal wiped out our defensive fleet in the first hour of fighting, Marcus continued. They had better ships, better weapons, more experience. By any reasonable measure, the colony should have fallen within days. The civilian population should have been enslaved or killed, and that should have been the end of it. What happened? Despite herself, Princess Lyrelii found herself interested in the story. The colonists surrendered. This drew confused murmurs from the court. Surrender was considered the ultimate dishonor in Zephyrian culture, a fate worse than death. But, Marcus continued with a slight smile, they surrendered very specifically. They offered to serve as the raiders' main supply base, providing food, water, fuel, and repairs for their ships. The Drakthal accepted, naturally, free labor and a secure base of operations. It was exactly what they wanted. I fail to see how this demonstrates anything positive about your species, Princess Lyrelii said coldly. The colonists were very good suppliers, Marcus said. Very efficient. In fact, they were so helpful that within 6 months, nearly the entire Drakthal fleet was dependent on them for basic necessities. Ships would arrive regularly for supplies and repairs. The raiders even started leaving skeleton crews to guard the colony while the main forces went on raids. And then, the colonists activated the neural inhibitors they'd been secretly installing in every Drakthal ship during routine maintenance. Simultaneously, across the entire fleet, the silence in the throne room was absolute. Even Empress Viridian's eyes were now fixed on Marcus with undivided attention. The raiders' ships simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, just completely disabled. The colonists then sent a message to the Galactic Peacekeeping Force with the exact coordinates of the entire immobilized fleet. The Drakthal Confederation lost 60% of their total naval capacity in a single day. They never recovered from it. Princess Lyrelii's scales had shifted to a deep blue, the color of deep thought. The colonists, they planned this from the moment of surrender, from the moment they detected the incoming fleet. Actually, the surrender was just the first move in a very long game. But the dishonor? What dishonor? Marcus asked genuinely. They saved their colony, protected their families, and dealt a devastating blow to a pirate confederation that had been terrorizing peaceful worlds for centuries. All without losing a single life on either side, I might add. The Drakthal raiders were captured alive and eventually rehabilitated. Some of them actually ended up joining the peacekeeping force. The princess began pacing again, but this time it seemed more like nervous energy than predatory stalking. This story, it could be fabricated. Also in the data crystal, Marcus said, along with several hundred similar examples spanning human history. Why are you telling us this? Empress Viridian spoke for the first time since Marcus had entered the throne room. Her voice was like distant thunder, carrying the weight of centuries. Because the galaxy is facing a new threat, Marcus replied, his casual demeanor becoming more serious. The Void Swarm has begun stirring in the deep reaches of intergalactic space. Our long-range sensors detected the first scout ships 6 months ago. The swarm consumed the Andorian galaxy completely before going dormant for 3,000 years. Now, they're waking up, and they're hungry. This news hit the assembled court like a physical blow. The Void Swarm was legend, nightmare stories told to frighten children. Ancient beings of pure hunger that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Most civilized species had convinced themselves that the swarm was myth, that such creatures couldn't possibly exist. You claim to have proof of this as well? The Empress asked, though her tone suggested she already believed. The Human Stellar Observation Network has been tracking their movement for months. We've shared this information with Earth's allies, but most governments are reluctant to accept the implications. Because acknowledging the threat means acknowledging that their mighty fleets are insufficient to stop it, Empress Viridian said with bitter understanding. Exactly. The swarm doesn't fight the way we fight. They don't conquer, they consume. Every battle fought conventionally against them just feeds them more energy, makes them stronger. The few records that survive from the Andorian resistance efforts all point to the same conclusion. Traditional military force is worse than useless against the Void Swarm. Princess Lyralii had stopped pacing entirely. And you think humans can succeed where the greatest military powers in galactic history have failed? I think humans can find a different approach, Marcus corrected. Because we don't think like warriors first. We think like survivors. And sometimes survival requires doing things that seem impossible. The throne room fell into contemplative silence. Finally, Empress Viridian spoke again. What exactly is Earth proposing? An alliance based on complementary strengths rather than raw power. The Zephyrian Empire has the finest military in known space. Your fleets, your warriors, your tactical expertise are unmatched. Humans have our own strengths. Adaptability, unconventional thinking, and a particular talent for finding solutions that more advanced civilizations miss because they seem too simple or too radical. And in practical terms, joint research into the Void Swarm's weaknesses, shared resources for experimental defense strategies, and if the worst happens, evacuation plans for entire star systems that don't assume we can fight our way out of the problem. Princess Lyralii laughed again, but this time the sound was different, less mocking, more incredulous. You're asking the greatest warrior civilization in the galaxy to plan for retreat. I'm asking the greatest warrior civilization in the galaxy to help ensure there's still a galaxy left to fight for, Marcus replied. Because if we can't find a way to stop the Void Swarm, there won't be any warriors left. There won't be anyone left. Empress Viridian rose from her throne, her massive form casting shadows across the chamber. These are serious accusations, human. Serious proposals. If you're wrong about the threat, you waste our time. If you are wrong about your people's capabilities, you waste our lives. Yes, Your Majesty, Marcus agreed. But if I'm right about both, then working together might be the only chance any of us have. The Empress studied him for a long moment, her 8 eyes seeming to look right through him. My daughter believes you are weak, human. Are you? Marcus considered the question seriously. By Zephyrian standards, absolutely. I couldn't win a physical contest against any warrior in this room. My ship couldn't survive a direct engagement with one of your fighters. In a traditional sense, I'm probably one of the weakest beings you've ever met. And yet you stand here without fear, making proposals that could reshape the balance of galactic power. Because weakness isn't the same as helplessness, Marcus said. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit that you need help. Princess Lyralii was watching this exchange with growing fascination. Despite her earlier mockery, there was something about this human that didn't quite fit her understanding of his species. He spoke of weakness, but projected confidence. He acknowledged his limitations, but made ambitious proposals. He seemed completely out of place in a warrior court, yet somehow he belonged here. "Mother," she said suddenly, "what do you know about humans that I don't?" Empress Viridian's scaled lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Many things, my daughter. Many things." The royal quarters of Empress Viridian were vastly different from the formal throne room. Here, the walls were lined with living coral that pulsed gently with soft amber light, and the air was filled with the sound of flowing water from hidden springs. It was a place of peace and contemplation, far removed from the martial splendor of the court. Princess Lyralii followed her mother through the curved corridors, her mind still reeling from the afternoon's revelations. The human, Marcus, had been given quarters in the diplomatic wing, but not before presenting several more data crystals containing evidence of humanity's unusual approach to galactic problems. Each story had been more surprising than the last. "Mother," Lyralii began as they entered the Empress's private study, "I need to understand. When a human spoke of the Kethril plague cure, you didn't seem surprised. You already knew, didn't you?" Empress Viridian settled into her meditation alcove, a depression in the floor lined with smooth stones that had been worn by centuries of use. Her 8 eyes reflected the coral light as she considered her daughter's question. "I knew," she confirmed. "Though the humans never made their role public, several species maintain detailed records of who actually develops major medical breakthroughs. The cure for Kethril wasn't the first time humans had quietly solved a problem that was killing millions across the galaxy. Then, why didn't you tell me? Why allow me to embarrass myself by mocking their representative?" "Because you needed to discover for yourself that strength takes many forms," Viridian replied gently. "You are young, my daughter, and you've been raised in a warrior culture. It is natural that you would see only the most obvious kinds of power." Lyralii's scales shifted to a deep purple as she struggled with this concept. "But they are weak, mother. Physically, technologically, militarily, by every measure that matters, humans are inferior. By every measure that we traditionally consider important," Viridian corrected. "But tell me, daughter, what makes a warrior truly formidable? Is it the strength of their arms or the sharpness of their claws?" "The strength of their spirit," Lyralii answered automatically, reciting a lesson from her childhood. "The courage to face any enemy, the wisdom to choose the right battles, the determination to never surrender." "Exactly. And what did you observe about the human today? When faced with a room full of beings who could tear him apart without effort, surrounded by an empire that could erase his homeworld with a single fleet, did he show fear?" Lyralii thought back to Marcus's calm demeanor, his steady voice, his relaxed posture even when she had been circling him like prey. "No," she admitted. "He showed no fear at all. When mocked and insulted, did he respond with anger or wounded pride? No, he actually seemed understanding, as if he expected it. And when presenting his proposal for alliance, did he exaggerate his people's capabilities or make false promises about what they could offer?" Lyralii's scales were shifting toward a lighter blue now as understanding began to dawn. He was completely honest about their limitations. He admitted they were weak by our standards. "The courage to face overwhelming odds without fear," Viridian mused. "The wisdom to remain calm under provocation. The determination to speak truth even when it makes one vulnerable. Tell me, daughter, do these sound like the qualities of a weak spirit?" The princess sat down heavily on one of the meditation stones, her 4 arms wrapped around herself as she processed this new perspective. But, Mother, if humans possess these warrior virtues, why do they appear so soft? Why don't they conquer and expand like every other strong species? Viridian's expression grew thoughtful. That, my daughter, is what makes them truly dangerous. Dangerous? I thought we were discussing their worthiness as allies. The two concepts are not mutually exclusive. The most valuable allies are often those who could be the most formidable enemies. The Empress rose and moved to a wall display that showed the current political map of the galaxy. Look here, Lyralii. Show me the human territories. The princess approached the display and highlighted the relevant systems. The human-controlled space was modest compared to the major empires, perhaps 50 star systems scattered across two spiral arms of the galaxy. But, as she studied the map more carefully, something strange became apparent. Their systems are oddly positioned, she observed. They're not clustered together for mutual defense. Instead, they're scattered throughout the territories of other species. Indeed. And what does that suggest about human expansion strategy? Lyralii traced the pattern with one finger, following the trade routes that connected human colonies to their neighbors. They're not expanding through conquest. They're expanding through integration. Their colonies are positioned to serve as trade hubs, research stations, diplomatic outposts. Now, look at the surrounding systems. What do you notice about the species that neighbor human colonies? This required more careful examination. The princess pulled up detailed information about each region, cross-referencing economic data, military activity reports, and diplomatic relations. What she found was startling. The regions with human colonies have significantly lower rates of interspecies conflict, she said slowly. Trade volumes are higher. Technological development is accelerated. And, Mother, these systems are reporting better outcomes on virtually every metric of civilization. The humans call it symbiotic expansion, Viridian explained. Instead of conquering territory, they make themselves indispensable to their neighbors. They position their colonies to provide maximum benefit to the surrounding systems. Research expertise, medical assistance, technological innovation, conflict mediation. Lyralii was beginning to see the broader pattern now. So when their neighbors grow stronger and more prosperous, the humans become more secure as well. And any threat to human colonies becomes a threat to the entire region. Precisely. It's a strategy that requires tremendous patience, sophisticated understanding of other cultures, and the ability to provide genuine value rather than simply taking what one wants. Most warrior species would consider it impossibly complex and slow. But the results speak for themselves, Lyralii admitted reluctantly. The human spheres of influence are among the most stable and prosperous regions in the galaxy. Viridian returned to her meditation alcove, her ancient eyes reflecting deep satisfaction. Now you begin to understand why I take their warnings about the Void Swarm seriously. A species that builds power through cooperation rather than domination sees threats differently than we do. Explain. When the Void Swarm consumed the Andorian galaxy, they faced resistance from dozens of species, each fighting independently, each holding back resources to protect their own territories, each suspicious that their allies might betray them for advantage. The resistance collapsed, not because they lacked strength, but because they couldn't truly cooperate. Lyralii was following this logic now. But humans have spent centuries learning how to make cooperation work. Their entire expansion strategy depends on building genuine partnerships. Exactly. If they say the swarm can only be defeated through unprecedented cooperation, they're not just making a strategic assessment. They're speaking from their core area of expertise. The princess began pacing again, but this time it was the restless energy of excitement rather than frustration. Mother, if this is all true, then why isn't this human Marcus presenting himself as a great leader or master strategist? Why does he seem so ordinary? Viridian's laugh was like the sound of distant wind chimes. Because, my dear daughter, that ordinariness is itself a strategy. Tell me, if a being appeared before our court claiming to be a great leader, demanding respect and recognition. How would our warriors react? They would challenge him. Lyralii answered immediately. They would test his claims through combat. And if a being appeared claiming superior wisdom or intelligence, they would seek to find flaws in his logic, to prove him wrong, and restore their own honor. But what about a being who claims nothing? Who acknowledges his weakness, speaks honestly about his limitations, and simply asks for partnership rather than demanding submission? Lyralii stopped pacing as the full implications hit her. Such a being cannot be challenged because he presents no challenge, cannot be humbled because he has already humbled himself, cannot be defeated because he doesn't position himself as a competitor. Now you understand the true subtlety of human psychology. They have learned to work with pride rather than against it. Marcus allows our warriors to feel superior because that feeling makes them more willing to cooperate. He positions humans as the junior partners in any alliance because that arrangement feels safe and honorable to more powerful species. But in reality, the junior partners often end up directing the overall strategy because they're the ones who understand how to make the alliance function. Viridian's eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. It's quite elegant, actually. Lyralii was quiet for several long minutes, absorbing these revelations. Finally, she spoke again. Mother, there's something else about the human that puzzles me. When I was mocking him, challenging him, circling him like prey, I expected him to show some reaction. Fear, anger, submission, anything. But instead, he seemed almost amused, as if he was enjoying the performance. Ah, Viridian said with satisfaction. You noticed that, did you? What did it mean? It means, my daughter, that Marcus Chun is far more than he appears to be. The humans didn't send an ordinary diplomat to the Zephyrian Empire. They sent someone very special indeed. Special how? Viridian rose and moved to another wall display, this one showing detailed files on various diplomatic personnel throughout the galaxy. With a few gestures, she brought up Marcus's official record. According to his public biography, she read aloud, Marcus Chun is a mid-level cultural attaché from the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Bachelor's degree in Xenosociology, minor specializations in trade law and conflict mediation. Standard career progression through various embassy postings. Unremarkable performance evaluations. No significant commendations or achievements. Lyralii frowned. That doesn't sound special at all. No, it doesn't. Which is exactly the point. Viridian manipulated the display to show a different file, this one marked with high-security encryption. However, if one has access to certain classified databases, a very different picture emerges. The new file was extensive, filled with mission reports, psychological profiles, and achievement records that painted a completely different portrait of Marcus Chun. Lyralii read through it with growing amazement. He was involved in the Centauri succession crisis, she breathed. The file says he personally negotiated the peace treaty that prevented civil war. Read on. The Rigel trade dispute, the Vega colony uprising, the first contact protocols for the Deltan Republic. Lyralii's voice trailed off as she realized the scope of what she was seeing. Mother, this human has been involved in virtually every major diplomatic success Earth has achieved in the past 20 years. And yet his public record shows none of it. How is that possible? Because Marcus Chun is what the humans call a gray ambassador. Someone whose greatest strength lies in being underestimated. His real value isn't in formal negotiations or public ceremonies. It's in situations where someone needs to be dismissed as unimportant while actually accomplishing crucial objectives. Lyralii turned back to stare at her mother. You mean today's meeting was exactly what Marcus intended. You underestimated him, as he knew you would. You revealed your prejudices about humanity, your assumptions about power and strength, your emotional reactions to challenges to those assumptions. Meanwhile, he gathered detailed intelligence about our military capabilities, our political structure, our cultural values, and our potential psychological weaknesses. And I helped him do it, Lyralii said with growing mortification. Don't be too hard on yourself, daughter. Very few beings would have seen through his act. I only recognize what he was doing because I've encountered his work before. Viridian's expression grew distant. The Kethral plague that Marcus mentioned, the Zephyrian Medical Corps was completely overwhelmed. We had lost 3 colonies, and we were on the verge of evacuating a 4th when the cure arrived. It came through back channels, no official credit claimed, just anonymous data packages transmitted to our chief medical officers. You think Marcus was involved? I know he was, because 6 months after the plague ended, he appeared at a minor trade conference on the Outer Rim, posing as a junior economic analyst. He spent 3 days asking seemingly innocent questions about our supply chains, our resource allocation methods, our emergency response protocols. Questions that seemed like routine academic research at the time. But in reality, he was studying how we had managed the plague response, what had worked, what hadn't, what we might do differently next time. Information that could be valuable for addressing future galactic health crises. Lyralii was beginning to appreciate the true scope of what they were dealing with. So when he tells stories about human ingenuity and unconventional solutions, he's not just sharing examples from human history. He's demonstrating the kind of thinking that he personally brings to complex problems. Every story was chosen to illustrate a specific point about human capabilities while also revealing something about how we react to those capabilities. What do you mean? Think about your reactions to each story. The Kethral Plague Cure made you think of humans as healers rather than warriors. The Drakthal Deception impressed you with their strategic patience, but also troubled you because it involved surrender, which we consider dishonorable. The Void Swarm Warning was presented as a crisis requiring unprecedented cooperation, testing whether we would respond with typical warrior aggression or be willing to consider alternative approaches. Lyralii realized her mother was right. Each story had been designed to gauge specific aspects of Zephyrian psychology and culture. He was reading us the entire time. More than that, he was teaching us to read ourselves. By the end of the audience, you were questioning your own assumptions about strength and weakness. That's the mark of a master manipulator, someone who can change your perspective without you realizing it's happening. Should we be concerned about this level of manipulation? Viridian considered the question seriously. That depends on his ultimate intentions. Manipulation used for selfish gain is dangerous. But manipulation used to facilitate genuine cooperation can be a form of wisdom. How do we tell the difference? By examining the results. Every mission Marcus has been involved in has resulted in outcomes that benefited all parties. The peace treaties he negotiated have held. The trade agreements he facilitated have increased prosperity on both sides. The conflicts he mediated have stayed resolved. So he manipulates people into making choices that are good for them. It's more subtle than that. He manipulates situations so that making good choices becomes easier and more attractive than making bad ones. It's the difference between forcing someone to do what you want and creating conditions where what you want happens to align with what they want. Lyralii was beginning to feel a strange mixture of respect and unease. This level of psychological sophistication, it seems almost beyond what any individual should possess. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Viridian said, manipulating the display one more time. Marcus Chun is not operating alone. The Human Diplomatic Corps maintains an extensive network of psychological analysts, cultural experts, and strategic planners. Every major diplomatic mission is supported by teams of specialists who study the target culture for months or even years before any contact is made. You mean, Marcus appeared before a court today, already knowing exactly how we would react to him? His clothing, his posture, his words, his stories, all of it was carefully calculated based on detailed analysis of Zephyrian psychology and our personal behavioral patterns. Personal behavioral patterns? Think about it, daughter. Humans have been observing galactic politics for decades. They have detailed files on every major political figure, including us. They know our strengths, our weaknesses, our prejudices, our fears, our desires. The full implications of this were staggering. Then this entire meeting was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to achieve specific diplomatic objectives while appearing to be a spontaneous cultural exchange. Lyralii sat down heavily again, her mind reeling. Mother, if humans are capable of this level of strategic sophistication, then they're not the junior partners in any alliance. They're the puppet masters. Perhaps, Viridian agreed. But consider this. If they have the capability to manipulate us into disastrous decisions, why haven't they? If they can predict our reactions so accurately, why not use that knowledge to conquer us? Because, Lyralii said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn, conquest through manipulation would ultimately be self-defeating. Puppets make poor allies when you're facing an existential threat. Exactly. The humans need genuine partners, not subjects. Which means their manipulation serves the purpose of helping us become the best possible versions of ourselves, rather than reducing us to tools. But how can we be sure of their motivations? Viridian's expression grew serious. We can't be completely sure, but we can observe their actions over time and judge the results. And so far, every interaction our empire has had with humanity has left us stronger, more prosperous, and more secure, even if we didn't realize we were being influenced. Sometimes the best help is the kind we don't notice receiving. Lyralii was quiet for a long time, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she spoke again. Mother, what are you going to tell Marcus tomorrow? I'm going to accept his proposal for alliance. Just like that. Just like that. Because whether the Void Swarm threat is real or not, an alliance with humanity will make the Zephyrian Empire stronger. And if the threat is real, then we'll need every advantage we can get. And if Marcus is manipulating us into this decision, then he's manipulating us into making a choice that serves our own interests. I can live with that kind of manipulation. Lyralii nodded slowly. What about me? What's my role in all this? Viridian smiled at her daughter with genuine warmth. You, my dear, are going to learn everything you can about human psychology and strategy. If we're going to be their allies, we need to understand how they think. You want me to become their student? I want you to become their equal. The humans have spent decades studying us. It's time we return the favor. And then we'll see who the real masters of this alliance turn out to be. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Marcus had requested a private audience with Princess Lyralii alone, claiming he had something important to discuss that couldn't wait for the formal alliance negotiations. The request was unusual. Most diplomatic protocols required senior officials to be present for any substantive discussions, but the Empress had approved it after a moment's consideration. Lyralii found herself walking through the palace gardens with the human diplomat, far from the formal halls of power where everything was recorded and analyzed. The gardens were her favorite place in the entire palace complex, a living artwork of bioluminescent plants and crystalline sculptures that had been tended by master gardeners for centuries. Your gardens are remarkable, Marcus said as they paused beside a fountain whose waters sang in harmonious tones. I've never seen anything quite like them. Thank you, Lyralii replied, though she was studying him carefully for any sign of the calculated manipulation her mother had described. They represent the harmony between nature and civilization that we Zephyrians strive for. I can see why you'd want to protect something like this from the Void Swarm. There was the casual reference that brought the conversation back to his diplomatic objectives. Lyralii had to admit it was smoothly done. Mr. Chun, she said, deciding to take a direct approach. Why did you really request this meeting? And please don't tell me it's because you wanted to see our gardens. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her fully. His expression had changed. The mild, slightly confused demeanor he had worn in court was gone, replaced by something much more focused and intelligent. Because, he said, you're not actually the spoiled princess you pretended to be yesterday, and I'm not actually the bumbling diplomat I appear to be. I thought it might be useful if we talked honestly for a change. Lyralii felt her scales shift color in surprise. I don't know what you mean. Princess, yesterday you performed the role of an arrogant, prejudiced royal who looked down on lesser species. You did it very well, but it was a performance. Your actual questions were far too insightful, your observations too sharp, and your eventual understanding of the implications too quick for someone who is genuinely as narrow-minded as you appeared. The directness caught her off guard. You're suggesting I was acting? I'm suggesting you were testing me, just as I was testing you. The question is why. Lyralii considered her options. She could continue the pretense, but something about Marcus's sudden shift to authenticity made her curious to see where this would lead. Perhaps, she said carefully, I wanted to see how Earth's representative would handle being underestimated and insulted. One can learn a great deal about a person's character from their reactions to adversity. And what did you learn? That you're far more dangerous than you appear. Marcus laughed, and this time the sound was genuinely amused rather than diplomatically polite. I prefer to think of myself as carefully prepared. Is there a difference? Preparation can be used for many purposes. Danger implie arme foulante. They resumed walking, but the atmosphere between them had changed completely. The formal dance of diplomacy had been replaced by something more like a fencing match between equals. All right, Lyralii said, since we're being honest, I'll admit that your performance yesterday was impressive. You managed to educate me about human capabilities while making me think I was figuring it out myself. Thank you. Your own performance was quite skilled as well. You managed to extract detailed information about our strategies and capabilities while making me think I was the one conducting the interrogation. Lyralii stopped walking entirely. Excuse me, Princess, every question you asked, every challenge you presented, every reaction you displayed, all of it served to make me reveal more about humanity than I had intended. By the end of that audience, I had essentially provided you with a complete briefing on human diplomatic methodology, strategic thinking, and psychological techniques. But you were answering my challenges. I was responding to your prompts. There's a difference. You guided that entire conversation while making it appear that you were simply reacting to my revelations. The princess felt a strange mixture of pride and concern. You realized what I was doing. Not immediately. It took me most of the evening to reconstruct the conversation and recognize the pattern. You're very good at what you do, which is intelligence gathering through social manipulation. My briefing materials described you as a skilled interrogator who specializes in making people want to impress you with information they shouldn't share. Lyralii's scales shifted to a deeper blue. Your briefing materials? Oh yes, we have quite extensive files on the Zephyrian royal family. Did you really think humans would approach the most powerful military empire in the galaxy without doing our homework? What exactly do your files say about me? Marcus smiled, and this time the expression was unmistakably predatory. That Princess Lyralii is one of the most formidable intelligence operatives in known space, despite having no official role in the Zephyrian military or security services. That she has been instrumental in preventing at least 4 separate coup attempts against her mother's rule. That she has successfully negotiated the defection of 3 enemy admiral-level officers through a combination of psychological pressure and strategic incentives. And that she once spent 6 months undercover as a simple merchant trader to infiltrate a pirate confederation and map their entire network structure. Lyralii was genuinely stunned. Those operations were classified at the highest levels of Imperial security. Even within the palace, only a handful of people knew about her real activities. How could you possibly know about those missions? Because, Princess, humans are very good at gathering information. Almost as good as we are at analyzing it. But those records are secured behind multiple layers of encryption. Yes, they are. Very impressive security. Actually, it took our cyber intelligence division almost 3 weeks to break through it all. The casual admission of what amounted to an act of war against the Zephyrian Empire was delivered in the same tone Marcus might use to comment on the weather. Lyralii felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garden's temperature. Mr. Chun, she said slowly, are you telling me that Earth has been conducting espionage operations against the Zephyrian Empire? I'm telling you that Earth conducts intelligence operations regarding all major galactic powers, just as the Zephyrian Empire conducts intelligence operations regarding Earth. We do. Of course you do. Did you think we wouldn't notice the deep cover trading missions your people have been running through our outer colonies? Or the fact that your scientific research stations just happen to be positioned to monitor all our major shipping routes? Lyralii realized that this conversation had moved far beyond diplomatic protocol into something much more dangerous. This is beginning to sound like mutual accusations of espionage. Only if you assume that espionage is necessarily hostile, Marcus replied. I prefer to think of it as mutual professional interest. Explain. Princess, every major power in the galaxy spies on every other major power. It's expected, it's necessary, and it's generally understood to be part of the normal diplomatic process. The question isn't whether we're gathering intelligence on each other. It's what we do with that intelligence. And what does Earth do with its intelligence on the Zephyrian Empire? We use it to avoid making diplomatic mistakes that could damage our relationship. We use it to understand your needs and concerns so we can propose mutually beneficial arrangements. We use it to identify potential threats to your security so we can share that information when appropriate. You make espionage sound almost benevolent. When conducted properly, it can be. Information warfare is only destructive when it's used for destructive purposes. Lyralii was beginning to understand that this entire conversation was itself a form of intelligence operation. Mr. Chun, why are you telling me all this? Is it revealing your intelligence capabilities contrary to standard operational security? Under normal circumstances, yes. But these aren't normal circumstances. Because of the Void Swarm? Because of what the Void Swarm represents. Marcus's expression grew serious. Princess, the threat we're facing isn't just another military conflict. It's a challenge that will require unprecedented levels of cooperation between species that have traditionally seen each other as potential enemies. And such cooperation requires trust. Exactly. And trust requires honesty about capabilities and intentions. If the Zephyrian Empire and Earth are going to work together effectively, we need to stop pretending we don't know what we both know we know. Lyralii had to smile at the convoluted phrasing. That's one way to put it. So let me be completely clear about Earth's position. Marcus continued. We know about your military capabilities, your strategic plans, your political structure, and your intelligence operations. You know about ours. Instead of pretending otherwise, why don't we figure out how to use that mutual knowledge constructively? You're proposing intelligence sharing. I'm proposing intelligence integration. Shared analysis, coordinated operations, synchronized planning. The kind of cooperation that would terrify any potential enemy, but would make both our civilizations nearly invulnerable to external threats. The scope of what he was suggesting was breathtaking. Intelligence integration went far beyond normal alliance protocols. It would essentially merge the strategic planning capabilities of both empires into a single, coordinated system. Mr. Chun, what you're describing would require levels of trust that typically take decades to develop. We don't have decades, Princess. According to our best estimates, the Void Swarm's advanced scouts will reach the Outer Rim systems within 18 months. That's much sooner than your public statements indicated. Our public statements are designed not to cause panic. Our private assessments are considerably more urgent. Lyralii felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. 18 months to prepare for a threat that destroyed an entire galaxy. Which is why we need to move beyond traditional diplomatic protocols and start talking about what's actually possible when two advanced civilizations work together without reservation. Without reservation, complete information sharing, coordinated military planning, joint research initiatives, integrated command structures. The works. You're describing something very close to political unification. I'm describing survival, Marcus corrected. Political structures can be worked out later. assuming there's anyone left to work them out. Lyralii began pacing again, her mind racing through the implications. My mother will need to be involved in any discussions at this level. Your mother has been involved since the beginning. Why do you think she approved this private meeting? Another surprise. You mean, the Empress has been in communication with Earth's leadership for weeks. This entire diplomatic mission is the public face of negotiations that have been ongoing behind the scenes. Then, yesterday's audience was theater for the benefit of the court and the general population, a way to introduce the concept of human-Zephyrian cooperation without making it seem like a decision imposed from above. Lyralii stopped pacing and stared at him. How long have you been planning this? The specific approach to the Zephyrian Empire? About 6 months. The general strategy for building anti-swarm alliances? We've been working on that for 3 years. 3 years? But you only detected the Void Swarm 6 months ago. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its casual confidence. Princess, we've been tracking the Void Swarm for much longer than 6 months. How much longer? Our deep space observation networks detected the first signs of swarm activity 15 years ago. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. 15 years? But that means humanity has known about this threat for more than a decade and has been quietly preparing for it while maintaining normal diplomatic relations with the rest of the galaxy. Why didn't you warn anyone sooner? Because 15 years ago, no one would have believed us. Even with proof, most governments would have assumed it was some kind of human trick to gain political advantage. We needed to wait until the threat was close enough to be independently verified. But in the meantime, you've been preparing. In the meantime, we've been learning everything we possibly could about every major civilization in the galaxy. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their potential contributions to a unified defense, their likely reactions to various types of crisis. Lyralii was beginning to appreciate the true scope of human strategic planning. The expansion strategy my mother mentioned, positioning your colonies to benefit neighboring systems, that was all preparation for this moment. Partly yes. Building relationships, establishing trust, creating networks of mutual dependence that could be activated when the time came. And the research projects, the medical assistance, the conflict mediation, all designed to demonstrate human capabilities while gathering intelligence about potential allies. Every problem we solved was also an opportunity to study how other species think, how they react under pressure, what they value most highly. Mr. Chun, Lyralii said slowly, are you telling me that human civilization has spent the last 15 years manipulating galactic politics in preparation for a threat that no one else knew existed? I'm telling you that human civilization has spent the last 15 years trying to position the galaxy for survival. Is there a difference? Marcus considered the question seriously. I hope so, Princess. I really hope so. The implications were staggering. If what Marcus was saying was true, then humanity had been playing a game of unimaginable complexity and scale, manipulating the political development of entire civilizations while maintaining the appearance of being a minor player in galactic affairs. Princess, Marcus said quietly, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand something important. What? Everything we've done, all the manipulation and planning and strategic positioning, none of it matters unless we can get the major powers to actually work together when the swarm arrives. And that means trusting people like you and your mother with the truth, even though the truth makes us vulnerable. Vulnerable how? Because now you know that humanity isn't really the junior partner in any alliance. You know that we've been planning this for years, that we understand your civilization better than you might be comfortable with, and that we have capabilities that go far beyond what we've publicly revealed. And that knowledge gives us power over you. It gives you the power to destroy everything we've been working toward. If the Zephyrian Empire decides that humanity is too manipulative to trust or too dangerous to ally with, then our entire strategy falls apart. Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what she was being told. Mr. Chun, why are you trusting me with this? Because, Princess, we've been studying your psychological profile for 3 years. And everything we've learned suggests that you're someone who can handle uncomfortable truths if those truths serve a greater good. And if you're wrong about that, Marcus smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm rather than calculated. Then, I suppose we'll find out whether humans are as good improvising as we think we are. Despite everything, Lyralii found herself smiling back. Mr. Chun, I think I'm beginning to understand why my mother finds your species so interesting. Oh, Princess, Marcus said with a grin. You haven't seen anything yet. 3 weeks later, Princess Lyralii found herself aboard the human research vessel Persistent Inquiry, heading toward the edge of known space where the Void Swarm's advanced scouts had been detected. The ship was unlike anything in the Zephyrian fleet, smaller than their frigates, but packed with sensors, analysis equipment, and what the humans called adaptive response systems. The crew was equally unusual. Instead of the rigid military hierarchy that characterized Zephyrian vessels, the humans seemed to organize themselves into fluid teams that were formed constantly based on whatever challenge they were currently facing. Lyralii had watched a single individual serve as tactical advisor during a navigation meeting, chief engineer during a sensor calibration session, and diplomatic liaison during communications with their Zephyrian escort fleet. It's controlled chaos, Captain Sarah Martinez had explained during the princess's orientation tour. Everyone has primary specializations, but we train cross-functionally because you never know what combination of skills a situation might require. Now Lyralii stood on the bridge watching that philosophy in action. The ship had just encountered something that defied easy classification, a debris field that showed signs of both void swarm activity and something else entirely. Analysis teams, what are we looking at? Captain Martinez called out. Swarm activity confirmed, came a voice from the sensor station. Molecular disintegration patterns match previous swarm encounters. But the debris field itself is wrong. Wrong how? Too organized. Swarm attacks typically leave completely random destruction patterns. This looks like someone tried to create defensive formations before being overwhelmed. Marcus, who had been quietly observing from a corner of the bridge, stepped forward. Captain, request permission to bring our Zephyrian observer into the analysis loop. Granted. Princess, we could use another perspective on this. Lyralii approached the main display, where a three-dimensional representation of the debris field rotated slowly. The wreckage was extensive, the remains of what must have been a significant fleet, but as the human analyst had noted, it wasn't random. These formations, she said after studying the pattern for several minutes. They look familiar. Familiar how? Captain Martinez asked. They're similar to the defensive configurations the Andorian Republic used in their final battles against the Void Swarm. We have historical records from their military archives. That's impossible, another voice said. The Andorian galaxy was consumed 3,000 years ago. There's no way anyone from there could have made it here. Unless, Marcus said quietly, they weren't from there originally. All eyes turned to him. Explain, the captain ordered. What if these aren't the remains of a fleet that was attacked by the Void Swarm? What if they're the remains of survivors from the Andorian galaxy who were fleeing the swarm and got caught up with the advanced scouts? The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Lyralii was the first to voice what they were all thinking. You're suggesting that some Andorians escaped their galaxy's destruction and have been traveling through intergalactic space for 3 millennia? I'm suggesting that if anyone did escape, they would have spent 3,000 years learning everything possible about Void Swarm tactics and capabilities. Captain Martinez was already issuing orders. Full spectrum scan of the debris field. Look for anything that might contain data storage systems, especially anything that might have survived both the original battle and 3,000 years in space. Captain, the sensor operator called out, I'm detecting power signatures from several larger pieces of debris. Faint, but consistent with emergency backup systems. Away teams, prepare for boarding operations. Full hazmat protocols. We don't know what kind of contamination we might be dealing with. Lyralii stepped forward. Captain, I request permission to join the away team. Princess, that's not necessary. Our people are trained for this kind of operation. With respect, Captain, if there are survivors or data archives from the Andorian galaxy, my people have the most extensive historical knowledge of their civilization. I might recognize things your teams would miss. Marcus nodded approvingly. She's right, Captain. And if we're going to make this alliance work, we need to start operating as a unified force rather than separate groups. Very well. Princess, you'll go with Team Alpha to the largest debris section. Marcus, you coordinate analysis from here. An hour later, Lyralii found herself floating through the twisted remains of what had once been a massive starship. Her environmental suit's lights cast eerie shadows as she moved through corridors that had been crushed and torn by unimaginable forces. Team Alpha, this is incredible, came the voice of Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the mission's xenoarchaeologist. The construction techniques, the materials, even the basic design philosophy, this is definitely Andorian technology, but it's been modified extensively. Modified how? Captain Martinez's voice crackled through the comm system. They've integrated systems from dozens of different civilizations. The power core is Andorian, but the shielding systems look Crothry. The computer interfaces are based on Vorthan designs, but the data storage is something I don't recognize at all. Lyralii was exploring what appeared to have been the ship's command center. Most of the equipment was severely damaged, but she found something that made her stop and call for the team's attention. Dr. Hayes, you need to see this. The archaeologist floated over to where Lyralii was examining what looked like a memorial wall. Engraved in the metal were symbols from dozens of different languages and writing systems. It's a record of civilizations, Lyralii breathed. Look, here's Andorian script, but also Crothry battle signs, Vorthan mathematical notation, even some symbols I think might be from the old Earth colonies. Earth colonies? But humans didn't have colonies 3,000 years ago. No, Lyralii said slowly, but the symbols look like precursors to current human writing systems, as if whoever made this had encountered early human civilization. Dr. Hayes was recording everything frantically. Princess, this suggests that the survivors didn't just flee their galaxy. They've been traveling between galaxies for millennia, possibly making contact with civilizations across the entire local galactic group. Captain, Lyralii called through the comm. We need to get this ship's computer systems online. If their data archives intact, they might contain intelligence about the void swarm spanning thousands of years and multiple galaxies. Working on it, Princess. We've found 3 other ships with intact power systems. Teams are attempting to access their computers now. The work was painstaking and dangerous. The ships have been badly damaged, and there is always the risk that attempting to power up their systems might trigger some kind of failsafe or explosive decompression. But gradually, the away teams began to extract data from the ancient vessels. What they found changed everything. Captain, Dr. Hayes' voice was tense with excitement. You need to hear this. We've accessed the fleet's historical archives. These ships aren't just survivors from the Andorian galaxy. They're survivors from 6 different galaxies that the Void Swarm has consumed over the past 50,000 years. 6 galaxies? The fleet commander's logs describe a pattern of expansion and dormancy. The swarm consumes a galaxy, goes dormant for several thousand years while it processes the energy, then wakes up and moves on to the next target. They've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. Marcus's voice came through the comm, sharp with concern. Dr. Hayes, do the archives contain any information about successful resistance to the swarm? That's just it. There has never been successful resistance. Every galaxy they've encountered has been completely consumed. The only survivors have been small groups that managed to escape before the final collapse. Then, how did this fleet get destroyed? If they were successfully fleeing, what caught them? According to the logs, they weren't fleeing anymore. They were coming back. Silence filled the comm channels as everyone processed this information. Coming back. Captain Martinez asked finally. The fleet commander's final entries describe a desperate plan. After 50,000 years of running and hiding, the survivors had developed what they believed was a viable strategy for defeating the Void Swarm. They were returning to make a stand. And obviously they failed, Lyralii observed. Yes, but Princess, their plan, it's remarkably similar to what Earth has been developing. Marcus's voice came through immediately. Dr. Hayes, we need those technical specifications downloaded immediately. If they had 50,000 years to study the swarm and develop countermeasures, their research could save us decades of work. Already on it, Marcus. But there's something else you need to know. What? The fleet wasn't just survivors from previous galactic destructions. They had been actively recruiting new species, gathering refugees from the advance waves of each swarm expansion. This wasn't just an Andorian fleet. It was a coalition of species from across multiple galaxies. How many species? According to the manifest, representatives from over 200 different civilizations were aboard these vessels. Lyralii felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum of space. Dr. Hayes, you're describing the largest coalition force in known history. And the Void Swarm destroyed it completely. The implications were staggering. If a coalition of 200 species with 50,000 years of experience fighting the swarm had been utterly defeated, what chance did the current galaxy have? Captain, Marcus said quietly, I need to speak with Princess Lyralii privately. Understood. Princess, return to the ship when your team's extraction is complete. We'll continue analysis en route to the rendezvous point. 2 hours later, Lyralii found herself in Marcus's quarters aboard the persistent Inquiry. The space was small, but efficiently arranged, with displays showing data streams from the ongoing analysis of the derelict fleet. Princess, Marcus began without preamble, we need to discuss what we've discovered. That our situation is hopeless. That our situation is more complex than we initially understood. Marcus gestured to one of the displays. The technical data we've recovered is extraordinary. The Coalition fleet had developed weapons systems, defensive technologies, and tactical approaches that are centuries beyond anything our galaxy has achieved. And it wasn't enough. No, it wasn't. But the question is why. Lyralii studied the display, which showed comparative analyses of Coalition and Swarm capabilities. The numbers don't make sense. According to this data, the Coalition fleet should have been capable of at least inflicting significant damage on the Swarm forces. Exactly. Which means either our analysis is wrong, or something else was happening during that final battle. Such as, Marcus manipulated the display to show tactical reconstructions of the battle. Look at the debris patterns again. The Coalition fleet was destroyed, but not all at once. It looks like they were fighting for several hours, possibly even days. So if the swarm was powerful enough to guarantee victory, why would the battle have lasted that long? Why not just overwhelm them immediately? Lyralii was beginning to follow his reasoning. Unless the Coalition was actually winning, at least initially. That's what I think happened. The Coalition strategy was working, but something went wrong. The question is what? Marcus brought up another set of displays showing detailed analysis of the swarm artifacts found among the wreckage. Princess, look at these readings. The swarm organisms we've detected show signs of significant damage and adaptation. Adaptation. They modified themselves during the battle. The swarm entities that destroyed the Coalition fleet were different from the ones that started the fight. The implications hit Lyralii immediately. You're suggesting that the Void Swarm can evolve in real time to counter new threats. I'm suggesting that the Void Swarm is more than just a mindless force of consumption. It's intelligent, adaptive, and capable of learning from its defeats. Then, every strategy we develop will eventually be countered, yes. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. Explain. Marcus smiled, and Lyralii was beginning to recognize the expression that meant he was about to reveal something significant. Princess, what if I told you that the Coalition fleet's defeat wasn't actually a failure? I'd say you're trying to put a positive spin on a disaster. What if I told you that their real plan was never to defeat the swarm in that battle? Lyralii stared at him. What are you talking about? Marcus manipulated the display one more time, showing a star chart that traced the path of the Coalition fleet through space. Look at their route. They weren't heading directly toward the swarm's main force. They were taking a circuitous path that led them past dozens of inhabited systems. So according to the logs we've recovered, they spent 3 months broadcasting detailed information about the swarm, its capabilities, and their countermeasures to every civilization they encountered. They were sharing their research. More than that, they were creating a network of prepared civilizations, each one warned and equipped to contribute to the overall defense effort. Lyralii was beginning to understand. The battle we discovered wasn't their final stand. It was a delaying action designed to buy time for other civilizations to prepare. Exactly. And, according to the star charts, our galaxy was one of their planned stops. But that was 3,000 years ago. If they had planned to warn our galaxy, why didn't anyone know about the swarm until recently? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Princess, I think they did make contact. And I think at least one civilization in our galaxy has known about the swarm threat for millennia. Which civilization? The one that's been spending the last 15 years quietly preparing every other species for a threat they couldn't yet prove existed. Lyralii stared at him as the full implications became clear. You're saying that humanity has had access to coalition research for thousands of years. I'm saying that humanity might be descended from coalition refugees. The revelation was stunning. If Marcus was correct, then everything about human behavior over the past decades, their expansion strategy, their diplomatic approach, their research priorities, suddenly made sense as the actions of species that had been preparing for the Void Swarm's arrival since their earliest days in space. Marcus, Lyralii said slowly, if this is true, then your entire species has been shaped by knowledge of this threat. It would explain a few things, wouldn't it? It would explain everything. The unconventional thinking, the focus on cooperation over conquest, the ability to find solutions that more advanced civilizations miss. The tendency to always have backup plans and contingency strategies, Marcus added with a wry smile. How long have you suspected this? Pieces of the theory have been floating around human academic circles for decades. The discovery of this fleet confirms what our xenoarchaeologists have been hypothesizing for years. Does this change our alliance plans? Marcus considered the question seriously. Princess, it changes everything. If humans carry genetic and cultural memories of previous encounters with the Void Swarm, then we're not just another species that might contribute to the defense effort. We're the inheritors of 50,000 years of anti-swarm research and strategy. And that makes humanity the most valuable ally any species could have in this fight, or potentially the most dangerous enemy, if we decide that cooperation isn't working. Lyralii felt a chill as she realized the true scope of what she was dealing with. Marcus, are you threatening me? I'm warning you, Princess. The Void Swarm is coming whether we're ready or not. Humanity has spent millennia preparing for this moment, but we can't do it alone. We need allies, genuine partners who can match our commitment to survival. And if the Zephyrian Empire isn't willing to make that commitment, Marcus met her eyes directly. Then we'll find species who are, because one way or another, this galaxy is going to be ready when the swarm arrives. The quiet determination in his voice was more frightening than any threat could have been. Lyralii was beginning to understand that humanity's apparent weakness might be the most sophisticated camouflage in galactic history. 6 months after the discovery of the Coalition fleet, Princess Lyralii stood in the command center of Zephyrian Battle Station Omega, watching the largest military exercise in galactic history unfold before her. The display screens showed thousands of ships from dozens of species moving in coordinated formations that would have been impossible just a year ago. The transformation had been remarkable. What had begun as a simple alliance proposal between Earth and The Zephyrian Empire had evolved into something unprecedented, a true galactic coalition dedicated to preparing for the Void Swarm's arrival. The key had been Marcus's decision to share the coalition fleet data with every species willing to listen. Princess Admiral Corvus approached her observation platform, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in the formal military position of respect. The human tactical advisors are requesting permission to implement Phase 7 of the exercise. Phase 7 already? Lyralii, check the chronometer. They're moving faster than projected. Yes, Your Highness. The cross-species integration protocols are proving more effective than anyone anticipated. Lyralii wasn't entirely surprised. Over the past months, she had watched human training methods transform military units that had been considered uncooperative into seamlessly functioning coalition forces. The secret, she had learned, wasn't advanced technology or superior strategic thinking. It was humanity's uncanny ability to find common ground between utterly alien ways of thinking. Admiral, what's your assessment of our readiness level? Honestly, Princess, 6 months ago, I would have said the idea of getting 40 different species to fight as a unified force was pure fantasy. Now, I think we might actually pull this off. High praise from someone who originally called the human proposals diplomatically naive. Admiral Corvus's scales shifted to a rueful blue. I may have underestimated the sophistication of human strategic planning. That was an understatement. The more Lyralii learned about humanity's preparations for the Void Swarm, the more impressed and concerned she became. What had initially appeared to be careful diplomatic work had revealed itself as something approaching species-wide manipulation on a galactic scale. Princess, came Marcus's voice from behind her. Do you have a moment? There's something you should see. She turned to find him approaching with a data tablet and an expression she'd learned to recognize as significant news incoming. Over the months of working together, Lyralii had developed a grudging respect for Marcus's ability to deliver game-changing information with casual understatement. What is it this time? Long-range sensor arrays have detected the main Void Swarm force. They're approximately 8 months out from the outer rim. The news hit the command center like a physical blow. 8 months was much sooner than their most pessimistic projections. How confident are we in that assessment? Admiral Corvus asked. Very confident. We've had multiple sensor networks tracking their approach vector for the past 3 weeks. The data all correlates. Lyralii felt a familiar chill. Marcus, please tell me you have some good news to go with this. Actually, I do. The swarm force is smaller than we expected. How much smaller? Marcus manipulated his data tablet, and the command center's main display shifted to show comparative analyses. Based on historical record from the Coalition fleet, we were expecting a swarm force roughly 10 times the size of the entire combined military capacity of our galaxy. And instead, we're looking at a force roughly equivalent to our own projected strength once all Coalition members are fully integrated. Admiral Corvus studied the display intently. That's surprisingly manageable. Too manageable, Lyralii said immediately. Marcus, this doesn't make sense. If the Void Swarm has been consuming entire galaxies for hundreds of thousands of years, they should have accumulated massive amounts of energy and biomass. Where is it all? Marcus smiled, and Lyralii recognized the expression that meant he'd been waiting for someone to ask exactly that.